Hey everyone, Schism here. Got a 2,500 point battle. My Empire versus Lizardmen. Starting off my opponent's far right, he has 10 skink skirmishes with blowpipes. Next to that, next to this impassable terrain, he has a salamander crew, a bastillodon, an ancient stegodon with giant blowpipes. To the left of that, there is another salamander pack. To the left of that, he has 20 Temple Guard. Behind that unit, he has a single Skink Chief with Cloak of Feathers, Light Armor, Enchanted Shield, and a Biting Blade. So he's a bit of a utility character. He's just meant to fly around and make sure a predatory fighter doesn't drag these guys way out of hand. To the left of that unit, he has 30 Saurus Warriors, sword and board. He's got a full command, and he is 6 wide. In the right-hand corner of that unit, he has an Old Blood with light armor, shield, crown of command, sword of might, and talisman of preservation. So quite tanky and strength 6. Saurus heroes are always pretty hard, and this one is no different. And stubborn to boot, so he's going to die, or else the unit probably won't boot and run away. Behind that unit, there's 20 skinks, and in that unit, there is a Croxagore. And there is also a level 1 with a Dispel Scroll. He has Wild Form. And another level 1 with the Cube of Darkness. And he has Wild Form as well. To the left of that unit, there is 9 Cold 1 Cav with Spears. There is also a BSB with a Halberd, Stegodon Helm, Luckstone, Light Armor, and Shield. To the left of that unit, there is 10 Skink Skirmishers with Javelins. My forces starting off on my entire left flank is 3 Demigryph Knights. They're holding up this whole side of the board all by themselves. And then the other corner of the board, I have my meat and potatoes. Starting off on my far left, I have a unit of 30 Great Swords. Next to that, there is a Hurricanum, proxied by this Torture Wagon. In front of that unit, there's 45 halberdiers. My general is tucked in the right-hand corner of that unit. He's an Archlector with armor of meteoric iron, crown of command, and a great weapon. To the right of that unit, there's also 45 more halberdiers, and in that unit, on the far left corner, is a BSB with full plate mail, shield, dragon helm, and a Seed of Rebirth. And on the other end of that unit is a warrior priest with heavy armor and shield, just there to give hatred for the first round of combat. And if he gets gacked after that, after he probably was worth his points, giving the halberdiers rerolls at least in one combat. Usually a horde of halberdiers is good to take out one infantry block or one of something, and then it just usually gets dwindled down beyond combat effectiveness. This can get some manageable buffs up on him. Behind that unit, there is 10 archers, and in that unit is a level 4, and he is rocking the Lore of Light. He rolled up Light of Battle, Fa's Protection, Banishment, and Barona's Time Warp. So one ranged spell to pick off some units and 3 combat buffs to help my Empire weaklings in combat. That level 4 also has a Dispel Scroll. Behind that unit, perched up on Fraggle Rock here, is 2 Great Cannons. And on the right side of my board, I have a captain on a Pegasus with full plate mail, enchanted shield, sword of strength, and Luckstone. So he's strength 5, and he's got himself a 1-up save, so he's pretty durable, and he can handle most of this flank here. Next to him, rounding out my forces, is 3 more Demigryph Knights. So I win turn 1, and I move up with my Demigryph Knights to threaten the flank here and deal with those Skink Skirmishers. I mean, it's really kind of a waste of points sending Demigryphs after these Skink Skirmishers, but if I don't make sure my rear is safe, he can just swoop these around and take out my archers in my level 4. You know, all he needs is to cause a panic test, and I fail, and my level 4 can easily flee off the board. So I can't let these Skink Skirmishers get by me. So I really have to send the Demigryphs to deal with them. I could redirect into the center of the board, but then they're just going to get right around my flank, and I don't want them in my cannons or my level 4 caster unit. My captain moves up by the giant impassable hill there, and he's angled so that if the salamander moves forward, which he's going to have to shoot, I'll be able to get a charge off. Or even going into the Bastillodon, I kind of like it. As long as I stay away, I'll still get my 1-up save. I just don't want to actually get into the Stegodon or even have to endure his blowpipe shots, but I'll only have to weather one turn if he does decide to allocate his resources that way. In the magic phase, I managed to get banishment off in the hopes of taking out one of the salamander crew. Unfortunately, when I randomized, I managed to take out one of the skink crew, and I only did 2 wounds to the salamander, so it is still operational. And then in the shooting phase, I misfired with one of my cannons. My other cannon, I go for his Bastillodon because I really don't want the bound spells doing any damage to my great swords and my halberdier unit. Because if he does 2d6 strength 5 hits and rolls relatively high, he can take out a good chunk of my unit and render them combat ineffective. So I go for the Bastillodon first, and I roll and I hit him, and I wound him, and I roll 1 wound. So epic fail on cannons turn 1. And also in the magic phase, I did put up a 5 upward save on these halberdiers, just in case any incoming fire or stray blowgun darts or whatever come their way. Lizardman turn 1, he moves his salamander around to take a shot off at my captain on a Pegasus. His Bastillodon, his Stegodon, and his other salamander pack move forward, and the rest of his lines move forward like you can see, his Saurus Cav leading the way. The good thing about having the Demogryphs on the far flank is he does have to allocate a decent source to deal with them, because if he doesn't, I'm going to get in his backfield and go after his level 1 mage bunker and get rid of his Dispel Scrolls and all that nasty goodness in that unit. So the Skinks on the far left won't do it, so he really does have to divert the Saurus Cav to take care of him, which is fine by me because it drags them way the hell out of the battle. And here you can see, this is when I realized at this point he leaves his Skinks staying there, because I'm going to have to reform to get through the rocks there, which will give him plenty of time to get to stand and shoot or shoot at me when I come in range if I can't fail my charge. So it's at this point I realized, since he stayed there, I can't make this charge because I can't fit in between the terrain, between that impassable terrain and the board edge, which is not good for me. So he fires off with his salamander. He does a wound to me, and I fail my armor save, so I have to burn my luck stone early on in the game here, which is not good. But my turn 2, I seek vengeance, and I charge headlong into the salamander pack. And this is when I realize, I have to do this, so I reform my Demogryphs to fit through the gap. So next turn, I will try and charge these skink skirmishers. And I don't have the musician in the unit, so I couldn't try and quick reform, so I just had to stay in place and reform. And this is the center of my lines. Nothing really happens. I stay put right now. I have the range advantage with great cannons. I want to try and pick off both his monsters, if not at least one, before I even advance. My Demogryphs back up behind the hill here to make his charge a little more difficult. And in the magic phase, I get a Foz protection bubbles just because. I really don't have much going on in the magic phase. I tried for another banishment, and I failed. So Foz was the next best thing. And I misfire with one of my cannons again, and it can't fire this turn or next. However, the other cannon hauls off and puts a 4-foot hole through the Stegodon from mouth to butt and takes it straight off the board, which is most good. And in the combat here, I do a wound to his salamander. He does nothing to me, and I win by combat res. His general or his BSB is nowhere in sight, so his salamander hunting pack flees. And I try and pursue him, and I don't catch him. I fall about an inch short. So this is Lizardman turn 2. His skink skirmishes stay put once again. His Bastillodon moves up on the far flank here to angle himself at the horde of halberdiers. The salamander moves up to try and get a flame shot. His salamander pack up top fails to rally and runs off the board, so I don't have to charge him off the board again, or charge him again in my turn, which I'm happy about that. And the rest of his forces on the far left here advance like so. His Saurus and his Temple Guard into the forest, the skink bunker right in tail, and his BSB and his Cold One Knights get into a position to hopefully charge my Demogryphs. He takes 6 dice and throws at the Bastillodon for the bound spell, and he gets off irresistible times 3. However, he does only roll d6 strength 4 hits and peels off 2 of my halberdiers. So Empire turn 3, I see an opening here. This is about I needed to roll a 7 or an 8 to get this charge with Swift Stride, and I realized if I can get into these skink here, and if I can defeat them, I can overrun past the Cold One Knights. and I can get into his backfield and threaten his rear. And then he's going to have to divert some serious attention to the backfield, or he's going to have some demigryphs wreaking havoc back there. So I end up making the charge, and so I have to dispatch, 10 juicy skinks, which shouldn't be too hard for 3 demigryph knights. And over on the right side here, I try and charge his skinks with blowpipes, and I fail. And from a stand and shoot reaction, I lose a wound on one of my demigryphs. My captain on a Pegasus reforms. At this point, I'm pretty confident that 45 halberdiers can take on a Bastillodon if they have to. So I move one of my 45-man units up into the tiptoed into the forest, and I kind of shimmy my greatswords to form a battle line here, so they're right in tow with my other unit of 45 halberdiers. And I get off another banishment in the magic phase and finish off that other unit of salamanders, so I don't have to worry about any flame templates in this game, which, with 45 fleshy men on the field and 2 giant units of them, I'm kind of happy to have those strength 4 templates gone, because if he gets one lucky roll, that could potentially be a half a unit. My cannon goes off again, and I do 1 wound to the Bastillodon, so most not good. And over here in the combat, I do 9 wounds to the skink. I couldn't finish off, even with the stomps, I couldn't finish off this last skink. And then this is what he rolls for a break test. Of course, he rolls double 1s, and he sticks in place. Now, this is mortifying, because you can see his Saurus Cav right there. So, yeah. And that's what he does. His turn 3, he takes the Saurus Cav and charges the flank of my Demigryph Knights. And then his Temple Guard moves up out of the forest, and his Saurus follows suit, and his Skink Bunker is right behind him. In the shooting phase, he takes another wound off my Demigryphs with his blowpipes here. And in the combat here, I finish off that one last skink. However, his Saurus Cav, barring the number of attacks these guys have, it's 2 for each cold one plus 2 for each rider. So it's like 10 strength 5 attacks and 10 strength 4 attacks. He only does 2 wounds to my Demigryph Knights, which isn't so bad. So I'm like stuck on, I got to make a leadership 5 or a 6 test. It's not too bad. It might even be a 7. I'm not sure. But I end up failing it, and I run, and he catches me. And he doesn't fail any of his difficult terrain tests for pursuing around that giant boulder. So at least the Cold One Knights are on the opposite side of the board as the rest of my army. So seeing the Temple Guard in this position, they're definitely extended farther than the rest of his forces, and I have my 1 unit of halberdiers that are in the forest, and I have the other unit of halberdiers that is right in front here. Now, if you look at the distance here, it is about 8 inches away. So I need to roll an 8 tentatively with my dice. And so promptly I decided to roll double 1s. But I'm like, okay, that's fine. At least I have this other unit that can potentially charge the flank. They're actually closer. I think I needed to roll a 6 or a 7 to get in combat here. And at least I'll be in their flank, and he won't be able to reform, because if he does, then I'm just going to charge his flank again. So I can pin his Temple Guard unit and potentially devastate it. However, I decided to roll a 4, and whatever the distance was, I failed by about an inch, and so I failed both my charges this turn. So my attempt to catch this Temple Guard unit out in the open has failed horrendously, and so it puts both my units like this. You can see how if I completed both these charges, it would have been lights out for this Temple Guard unit. Or if I completed just the flank charge after I failed the front charge, it still would have probably been lights out for the Temple Guard. But now I'm stuck in the woods with my far right halberdier unit, and if he charges that unit, I'm not going to be steadfast, and odds are he'll probably win that combat, which is no bueno for me. But my Demigryphs finally made it into the skinks with blowpipes here, and they didn't take another wound. And you can see I moved my Hurricanum up to make sure that all 3 of these units here are just barely within 6 inches of it, so at least in the first round of combat I will get +1 to hit. And then I take, the only real choice I have here is to take my greatswords and put it in front of his Saurus unit. Yeah, it's kind of suicide, but at this point I realized during his turn, he's set up now where he could charge his Temple Guard and the Saurus unit into that middle unit of halberdiers, and if he does that, he's probably going to crush all the way through it, and then he can probably overrun or pursue me back into my Hurricanum and possibly, onto my wizard units and through my cannons. So I have to take my stubborn greatswords, I think at least, and park them right in front of his Saurus unit. So this way he can't get a double charge onto my halberdiers unit, and he really can't double charge my swordsman unit because all I need is for one or two of them to live, and then both my halberdier hordes will go into the side and the rear of his temple guard unit. And here you can also see I take my captain and a Pegasus and I park him right behind his temple guard, and I do this to force him to react to it, because if he doesn't, I'm going to charge my captain and Pegasus into his skink bunker and start killing all his wizards out of that unit. In my shooting phase, I misfire with my cannon again, and the other cannon does nothing to the Bastiladon. I'm still shooting at the Bastiladon at this point. And in the combat here, I do 8 wounds to his skink, so better showing from these 2 demigryphs than the 3 demigryphs did on the other skink unit. He breaks from combat and he flees. I just choose to reform. It's not really worth my time. So Lizardman turn 4. He takes both his casters out of the unit and reforms his skink bunker to face my captain on a Pegasus, keeping his casters safe. His Cold One Knights reform and move up like so. And his Saurus unit actually does go into my great swords here. Now, I'm not really liking this combat because A, his lord's in here, B, he's got a lot of strength for attacks, and C, I'm just an empire, and D, he's actually going first, and E and F, I'm only strength 5. There's a lot of reasons why I don't like this combat, but what I do like about this combat is I'm stubborn. And he takes his Temple Guard unit, and he takes the opportunity to try and break my Steadfast because I won't be inside the woods. And he takes his Temple Guard in hopes to dash my hopes of potentially defeating him. And he takes his Bastiladon, and he reforms him around so he can try and get a bounce spell off in the magic phase and try and take out my Demigryph unit so they can't assist the rest of the battle. In the combat here in the middle, I do 6 wounds to his Temple Guard. Now, mind you, in this combat, I am +1 to hit, and I have hatred. So I'm hitting him on 3s with a reroll, and I'm wounding him on 4s, and he has a 5-up save. I only managed to get through 6 wounds, and he does a total of 10 wounds to me. He wins this combat, but he doesn't win this combat by enough. My BSB is in this unit. I think I was on a rerollable leadership 7, and I managed sticking. So despite not being steadfast, I managed to keep it close enough to where I actually had a passable leadership test. And the other combat over here is Saurus haul off and do 6 wounds to my Temple Guard, to my great swords here. I think 5 of them was just from the Old Blood himself. He's quite a beast in combat with 5 attacks and predatory hunger. With a few good rolls, he can really lay out some hurt. And I only managed to do 3 wounds to him, which is kind of not as good as I expected, but it is what it is. Empire turn 5. I take my Demigryphs and I charge his Bastiladon. He opts to flee, and he flees straight through the combat of the Halberdiers and the Temple Guard, and he ends up in the middle, and I charge him once again with my 45-man horde of Halberdiers, my general, and he flees again, and this time I redirect into his Temple Guard, so I get the Temple Guard pinned in nice and good, and my Hurricane moves up to grant +1 to hit. Now at this point I realize that during his turn, if I don't do something, his Saurus Cav here is going to charge the flank of my Greatswords. Now my Greatswords might be able to take on a bit of abuse from the Saurus in the Old Blood, but if this Cold One Cav gets into my flank, they are curtains. So I don't really have a choice here but to sacrifice my captain to try and hold up these Saurus Cav here. It is turn 5. If I can hold them up for 1 turn, I can keep this Saurus Cav from doing any more damage this game. And this is my magic phase. I roll, I think, a 6 and a 5, and because of the Hurricanum, I automatically get 12 dice. So I got a loaded magic phase. And the first thing I do is I cast Banishment on this unit, and I take 1 of them out. Then I cast Light of Battle on my stubborn greatswords. Now, I did this because I don't know where my general is going to be if I have to pursue or overrun the Temple Guard. I want to make sure. I don't even want to leave this up to a chance of having to roll. The first combat, I lost, and I failed my first Leadership 9 Stubborn, so I needed the BSB reroll, which was just barely within 12 inches, so I don't even want to risk. No matter where my characters go, I don't want to have to worry about these guys. So I cast Light of Battle on them. And then I got Barona's Time Warp off on the Halberdiers here. And I also got the 5+ ward up on him. So this unit is going nowhere. My archers on the hill actually opened up and took a wound off his skink hero. And then my cannon goes through and peels off one more of the Saurus cap. In the combat over here, I fare a little bit better. I still lose 6 greatswords. However, I do manage to kill 5 of the Saurus. And I stick around. In the combat here, I go to town. I do 11 wounds to the Temple Guard, and he only did 2 wounds to my Halberdiers. Because of Time Warp, I had always strike first. Not that it really mattered, but it did give me rerolls again with this unit, and that's all it really took to obliterate the rest of the unit there. So he breaks from combat, and he flees through his Bastiladon, and I do not catch him. I try to pursue him with both units, and I fail to catch him. I rolled abysmal again. I think I rolled like 2 or 3 with both units to try and catch him, so I come nowhere near getting him. Lizardman turn 5, he takes his Saurus Cav and goes into my captain on a Pegasus because he didn't have a choice. And his Temple Guard fail to rally, and they flee through his skink bunker. His skink bunker remains in place. His Bastiladon rallies and turns to face. And his skink with javelins open up and take off 1 halberdier off my 45-man unit. In the combat here, I'm not really looking forward to it. I think he's pretty much got me beat. He's got a lot of attacks. I can only hope that I make a lot of 1-up armor saves. And so I issue a challenge because if he takes it with a captain, odds are I'll only be losing by, I'll probably be able to kill the captain or the hero or the champion, excuse me. If I kill the champion, I'll have 1 combat res, he'll have a charge, a banner, and a BSB. So I'll be -2 to my leadership test, which I'm okay with. It's a lot better than possibly getting wiped out. So he refuses with his BSB because he doesn't think that his BSB can take my captain, or he just wants to get all the attacks on. Actually, you know what? His BSB probably would have nerfed my captain, but I think he wanted to go with all the attacks of the Cav because he'll get 4 cold ones and he'll get 4 riders with strength 5. And he'll be able to get, all those attacks in on. And after all is said and done, he does no wounds to my captain. I deflect it all off, and I do 1 wound to the unit. I managed to fell another one. So I end up losing the combat by 2 or 1. I lose this combat by 1 or 2, but I end up failing my break test, and he runs me down, and 1 more of his Saurus Cav trips on the fence here. And yeah, so the captain had a good chance to stay in the fight and hold up this unit for the rest of the game, but alas, it was not meant to be. The combat in the center here, he does 5 wounds to me. His old blood rolls pretty deplorable, and I do 4 wounds to him. So I can see that this is a losing battle, but I'm sticking in there. My turn 6, I take my Halberdier unit on the far right, and I charge his Bastiladon, and he holds. And then I charge his Bastiladon with my other Halberdier unit. I get a little greedy here, and then he chooses to flee. So he flees straight through his skink bunker to the safety of the other side, and I fail both my charges and end up like so. Because of the way I was facing, the Saurus unit was actually out of my front line of sight, so I couldn't redirect into him. So, not good for me. My Hurricane moves up to give +1 to hit to my greatswords, and the rest of the unit, just in case he's foolish enough to take his skinks in there. My Daemmergriffs finally make themselves back towards the center of the board. In the magic phase, I get a 5 protection on my greatswords and Light of Battle because they're really the only ones in combat and really need it. And if they can hold out, well, then I get to save their points in this game, which this game's pretty much coming down to the wire. If I lose this unit, it very much might mean I lose the game. And then to top it all off, both my cannons misfire. So yeah, what wasn't meant to be. The combat here, he goes to town, even with 5 protections up. I think he rolled 4 predatory fighters with his old blood, which just created an insane amount of attacks. And my great swords go off and kill 5 of the temple guards. So the temple guards finally, temple guard, excuse me, the Saurus. The Saurus is finally getting whittled down to a manageable number. However, he's just killing me slightly faster than I can kill him. So Lizardman turn 6, his temple guard fair to rally once again, and they hoof it for the other side of the board. His Bastillodon, this stupid Bastillodon rallies again. This thing was my nemesis all game. I couldn't kill it with cannons. I couldn't kill it with infantry. I couldn't chase it down. It just sat there and nana booed me all game. It's most frustrating. So in his magic phase, he gets off wild form, which is no bueno. And yeah, he hauls off and kills 4 more of my great swords. I consider myself quite lucky here, and I kill 1 of his Saurus. So when all is said and done, the great swords live through the battle, which is most amazeballs. So that is a big chunk of points that did not die. Granted, they were going to die, but they didn't die. So we tallied it all up at the end because this was definitely a turn 6 game. Empire ended with 555 points, and Lizardmen ended up with 320. Lizardmen picked up they picked up just my Demogryph Knights and a few odds and ends. Nothing really of note. All 3 of my main blocks were still intact, so really wasn't. They picked up my Demogryph Knights and my Captain on a Pegasus were the 2 units I lost in this battle. And the Captain sacrificed his life so that the Great Swords would live. And thankfully, the Great Swords did pull through and not all die. So a victory to the Empire all in all, albeit not by much, but a victory nonetheless. Some notes. That one lonely skink, that really changed the shape of this game. That one skink that I failed to kill with my 3 Demogryph Knights and failed, to let me overrun through and get to the back of his lines. That would have created so much havoc for his army. Just that cold-blooded, man. Cold-blooded, it just gives you a lot of opportunities, a lot more opportunities to roll double ones, and it really shined in this game, and it really put, a pitchfork in my plans on that left side. I mean, granted, the Saurus Cav really never really got in the game, but had that happened, I probably wouldn't have had to sacrifice my captain to deal with such. And by doing so, he could have been chewing up points somewhere else in the game. But no, that one lonely skink had to stick his landing in that combat. So this game with my cannons, misfires everywhere. Misfire, misfire, misfire. However, they did get their points back by taking out the Stegodon. And that was a huge threat. That Stegodon, if it crashed into my lines, it probably would have took out at least 15 to 20 of my halberdiers before I was managed to drag it down. I mean, possibly, but with D6 impact hits and a thunderstomp, if I couldn't drag it down in the first round of combat, odds are it would have done some serious damage to one of my units. So I really can't complain about the cams this game. They did take out one of the big giant Gribblies, and they did make up their points back. But man, there was a lot of misfires this game. I think I rolled at least 1 misfire a turn, and then I rolled 2 misfires on my last turn, which is not fun at all. And this game really goes down to a lack of finishing the job, man. I should have picked up the points in the Bastillodon if I played a little bit smarter, along with the Temple Guard unit. That Temple Guard unit is well over 300 points, even though there's only 20 of them. They did have the Razor Standard, I believe. So, I mean, that's 45 more points on top of the unit's cost. I mean, I did get the banner for them, but, with them fleeing on the board, I still wasn't able to mop up the points there. And this game's a lot closer because of that. And I really could... the same could be said for my great swords, who probably should have fell at the end, but they didn't. But at least they weren't fleeing. And this game was, the captain definitely saved the day. Granted, he gave his life and he gave his points up. Had he not done that, the great swords definitely would have fell down. And if the great swords fell, then this game would have swung into the Lizardmen's favor, and this would have been a Lizardman victory. So, I mean, sometimes what's good about characters, with the characters on Pegasus and other flying units, but especially Captain on Pegasus, there's so much versatility. I mean, he really could threaten, any of the skink skirmishing units. He could really take out the salamanders. He could tie up the Bastillodon all game and potentially beat him through combat res if he snuck a wound through, because Lord knows the Bastillodon is probably not going to do anything to him unless he hits with his tail attack. And even then, it's only one wound. But just having that option just to really gum him up like that. And the Pegasus even had he deflected the first round of combat. He had a great chance to survive through that whole entire thing. He just needed to pass one Leadership 7 test, from that combat he failed. Had he had stuck that, he could have really done some damage in that unit. But all in all, he's quite durable, and I really owe this game to the captain on the Pegasus. So thank you very much for listening.